That's great. So, oh, that's me. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time about me. You can Google me. I'm on LinkedIn like everyone else, so you can have more information. I've been in the fintech space for a very long time. I'm an investor myself, so I'll be very happy to share with you what I learned. I'm also on multiple boards. So everything I'm conveying with you, I've lived and I'm still living actually. So, as I mentioned, if you want to be a great advisor to entrepreneur, whether they're tech or they're not, entrepreneur in general, you really, really need to learn about fundraising, because eventually your entrepreneur is gonna fundraise when he or she wants to grow the company. And that can have huge impact on how your company is going to grow, but also how the company is going to be successful in terms of financial returns for the funding teams, for the investors, for the employees, for everyone. So it's a super important topic. And really don't hesitate to interrupt. I really want to make it as fun and engaging as possible. So there are multiple ways to raise funds. Very often we think about equity, simply because if you look at any newspaper, you're going to see the last raise, and it's very sexy to talk about how much companies raise with usually VC investors, but you have other ways to raise money. I like to mention that because equity obviously means you're going to dilute, the entrepreneur is going to dilute his ownership in the company. And that sometimes is not necessary. And you want to make sure that your entrepreneur has as much skin in the game as possible, and that also they're going to monetize as much as possible. So one of the way to raise funds, grants. Obviously, we all love grants. Equity, debt, clients. It's something that we usually don't speak about. The time, the resources, the energy you might allocate or your entrepreneur might allocate to raise equity or debt or grant sometimes can be allocated to finding new clients, finding business, and get the same return. So you don't dilute your company, you don't pay interest with debt, and you're growing your company. So clients, it's something that I want you to also keep in mind. Usually we don't talk about clients when we're talking about fundraising, but that's something I wanted to mention, even if it's not an official fundraising way. So grants, I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Dilutive, non-dilutive grants. Obviously, non-dilutive, we like it very much. It's always interesting for your entrepreneurs to look if there is, grants that apply to them, that might be based on the industry, the geography, their racial, gender background. So I highly encourage to look. Obviously, there is always a cost opportunity to put together an application for grants, but usually the returns is greater than the opportunity cost. So just have a look, that's never really lost. Debt. So we don't really speak usually of debt for early stage company for a couple of reasons. I would say the first is because financial institutions are not very used to underwrite debt for early stage companies. And they're not even very used to underwrite debt for technology companies, even later stage. They're getting used to that, but they're not necessarily very up to speed. But debt is a very good way, obviously, for a company that is already producing income. Especially with the interest rate that we see right now, simply because, again, it allows your entrepreneur not to dilute its ownership. I keep coming back to that, but you believe in the business, the entrepreneur believes in his business, the employees believe in his business. Why would you give away a piece of a business if you don't have to? Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just wanted to hit on the middle column there, Peggy, on convertible debt, which is an instrument that's typically used by early stage entrepreneurs to uh, get money. Did you want to maybe just highlight on that particular topic? Because that does convert into equity.
Yes, so uh, venture debt, and maybe let's go through the three of them. And there is a fourth I want to mention as well. So venture debt, that is very typical. It's a loan that the company can take and repay over the life of a loan. No brain surgery, you know that. Convertible debt, as Rob mentioned, this is a product that has been developed, especially when you look at new way of financing like SAFE and stuff like that, that has been developed, and it's usually a loan that converts in equity. So that can be more or less dilutive depending on the terms, but it's something that is, again, it's debt, but it can sit on both page, I would say, debt or equity. And the working capital line, as you know, that would be kind of a line of credit. Another type of debt that we've seen more and more, and you might have heard about a company called Clearbank. Now the name is Clearco, where basically they're financing sales and marketing activities for organizations. So let's say I have a subscription business. I want to allocate more money to marketing, but for that I need resources. Why would you raise equity for that? You raise debt, and this company is really focusing on debt for the purpose of marketing. So they're going to look at all your metrics. If the metrics are good, they're gonna lend you the money. So it's a great way for early stage company to access debt, even if they don't necessarily have the financial performances for a traditional loan. And I see a couple of questions or comments in the oh, okay, thank
I
you.
was just referring, but actually, just regarding Clearco, Peggy, is that typically for SaaS businesses, software as a service businesses that are using that kind of marketing? Like enterprise style businesses probably wouldn't want to go. Enterprise sales businesses wouldn't want to go there.
Everything with a recurring revenue model. And, I took Clearco. You can look at Just Ventures, for example, in the UK, or Product Vessel. And even if you're actually a content creators and you have subscribers, as long as it's this recurring revenue model, you can have access. But, yeah.
I'm just, Guyan did ask a question. I think of Clearco, is their rate fair?
Well, that's that's a good question. I was actually looking at their rate a couple of days ago. I thought it was a bit expensive, to be totally honest with you. That's my own perspective. After, you always need to kind of look at the opportunity cost of growing, not growing. If you have no other choice, if you cannot have venture debt, if you don't want to raise equity and dilute yourself, sometimes it's worthwhile to pay that type of rate in order to really expand your business. But I hear you, I thought the rates were a bit high. So, which I'm sure you think as well, otherwise you wouldn't have asked that question. So let's do a deep dive on equity, and that's what we're going to talk about. Before I jump to the equity part, any comments, questions on this clients, grants, debt type of financing mode? No? Okay, so let's get moving, and let's talk about equity. So equity is usually the first thing that comes to mind when we're talking about fundraising. So I will speak about the type of investors, also the amount of money you should look into raising, valuation. I'm going to do a bit of a dive on women. Hopefully you're supporting also women entrepreneurs. There are some specificities when they're raising equity, usually interesting one. We'll discuss a bit the fundraising materials and the due diligence process. And as Rob mentioned earlier, we'll also put ourselves in the shoes of an investor, because that will give you a better idea of what is important. So the type of investors, again, we usually mention VCs because that's what we know the best. Depending on the stage of your company, VCs might or might not be the right source of capital. So family and friends is a very good source of capital. Of course, not everyone has family and friends that can allocate capital to a venture, but it's very important because investors like to see that not only you have skin in the game, but also your family and your friends. So you're really committed to the business because you don't want to let down people who are very close to you. So it's not necessarily about the amount, because again, not everyone has a lot of money to invest, but it's about the fact that people first believe in you and committed capital. So that's something we need to keep in mind. Business angel. So business angel, after the love money of family and friends, is usually a second source of equity, of capital. So business angels, you can access them through multiple ways. You can access them. I'm a big proponent of equity crowdfunding platform. I'm not sure if you are familiar with that. In Canada, that would be FrontFunder. I'm an investor and I'm on the board of a company. In the US, that could be Start Engine, WayFunder, Seed Invest. You have a lot of platform. And oh, sorry. Thank you, Rob. I'm looking at
Peggy, you like them because what? The terms are better.
I like, and I'm coming to that. So I like equity crowdfunding because your entrepreneur don't always have access to people with a checkbook. I mean, that's the reality. You have already, or they have already probably tapped their family and friends, but they don't have a network of thousands of people who could invest in their company. So I like it very much, obviously, for the access it gives. I also like it very much because to be successful, there's going to be a marketing campaign that the entrepreneur is going to do. So for example, I have a company, I'm raising money through an equity crowdfunding platform. I will post on LinkedIn, I will post on Facebook, I will post on social media. I'll contact my clients to let them know, do you want to be an investor? This is my business, and all that great stuff. So you get a lot of value in terms of marketing at the same time for your company. So your clients can become your investors, your investor can become your clients, and you can also acquire new clients. So I really, really like this marketing approach. But also to contrast a little bit with a very traditional way of raising funds with family offices, venture capitalists. Emotionally, it's way less exhausting when you raise money with institutional investors, and institutional mean people who do that for a living, such as VCs or family office. You're going to have a tremendous amount of pushback, and emotionally, it's difficult to be 95% of the time told no, if not 99%. It's extremely time consuming. So for a CEO to run a fundraising campaign on an equity crowdfunding platform versus going door to door speaking to VC, this is way more efficient, especially for early stage company. As you're getting later stage, you won't have a choice than to have institutional investors because you want bigger check. But very early stage, I would highly recommend that avenue, especially that in Canada, we don't anyway have a lot of early stage pre-seed, seed VC investors. So you don't really have a lot of options anyway. And I'll go, I'm sorry, I don't want to jump there yet. I'll go in more details at which stage, which investors make the most sense for you in the next slide. I'm going to stop for a second. Any questions on crowdfunding, business angels, family and friends? I'm sure it's pretty straightforward, but anything there that you might have questions? No, that's great. Okay. I'm not sure if it's great that you don't have questions, but it is what it is. So number 3, incubators, accelerators. So I'm sure you're quite familiar with that. That can be the tech star of the world. Companies apply, they become part of a cohort, and for 3-6 months, usually more like 3 months actually, they work in the past, it was in a co-working space. Now it's a digital co-working space. And this incubator / accelerator help them to find potential investors, but also how to grow their business, how to develop their product, all that great stuff. So, and usually they invest in the company as well. So it's, thank you, Amanda. And so that's another avenue. This is more of a strategic avenue when the business is really trying to get somewhere. So I would not recommend to any company to join an incubator or an accelerator. They might not see any value, but it's one of the avenue where you could find some funding and strategic help for your company. The next 3 on the list: family offices, venture capitalists, strategic investors. So these are really this institutional investor I was referring to a bit earlier. So these investors are very sophisticated. They see tremendous amount of deal flow usually, and they are quite picky with the company they invest in. So family offices will be Rob built a business and exited the business for 200 millions. And now he allocated his money, part of his money or totality of his money in investing. And maybe a small slice of this investment is going to early stage company. So you have family offices that are more or less sophisticated, let's be honest. I like working with, I managed a family office in my previous life, so I'm familiar with that world. I like to raise money with family office because they can take decisions very fast. I don't like to work with family offices because they're very mercurial. So one day they are absolutely in love with your business model and they want to take the full round. And tomorrow, because, you know, last night they had a drink with a friend who told them the business model is not good, they tell you that finally they don't want to invest. So that's, I would say, the family office, they can write very big checks. But, you know, it's a bit damn if you do, damn if you don't, if I can say that. Unless you have personal relationship with a family office, and that's a different story. Venture capitalists, I'm sure you all know multiple names of funds in Canada, in the US. These are obviously professional investors raising funds, can be funds that are like 25 million that they allocate, or can be billions of dollars that they want to allocate. You can have venture capitalists that have teams that are dedicated to bring value to the company they invested in. So they will have a specialized in HR that's going to help their company in portfolio hire. They're going to have a specialist in sales, in marketing, and all this great stuff. So there is a lot of value you can get from a venture capitalist firm when they have this type of structure. It's quite rare to have this type of structure. You need funds to be already very large just to be able to support the cost. Most VC funds actually allocate capital. So they get capital from their own investors, they allocate capital. Yes, they might go on boards of companies, but it's going to be very limited interaction. So you have a full range from VCs that are extremely involved to VCs that are, silent investors, and that's fine. You just need to see which one makes sense for you. The challenge when you raise funds is that you don't always choose who want to invest in you, unfortunately. So sometimes your entrepreneur will have to take checks from companies, from investors they would rather not deal with, but they don't really have a choice. And that's something that if you look at the media, I think is a bit disingenuous in the sense that there is indeed a lot of capital on the market, but this idea that any entrepreneur can raise money easily overnight and with 25 VCs fighting to put a check is absolutely not the case. It might be the case for a few very successful serial entrepreneurs, but for the average entrepreneur, it's not the case. So unfortunately, I have more and more entrepreneurs thinking that fundraising is easy and that they see valuations in the newspapers, they see, the amount raised, and they think that it will be an easy process. One thing you don't see in the press release is the terms to which entrepreneur agree to be able to raise money. And what I mean by terms is that very often you just see, okay, company XYZ raise 100 million at 800 million valuation, whatever, don't quote me on that. But what you don't see is the preferred shares and all the special terms that investors have that, for example, dilute previous investors and put the funding team more or less, in a dependent position of this VC. So it's there is always more than meet the eye. So keep in mind that VCs are professional investors. That's their business. They're not there to be kind to entrepreneur or to be whatever. It's not a charity. So if they invest, it's because they want return. That's as simple as that. And the last one, strategic investors. So that can be, think about a company in the fintech space, taking an investment, a sizable investment from a bank, for example. That's really that type of synergy. Usually strategic investors are very slow, very, very slow to actually move and invest in a deal. But that can become very valuable. Sometimes it is underwhelming in terms of the value they actually bring. Maybe you saw this article last week or Monday from Finance It. So Michael Garrity, a very, very successful tech entrepreneur, has this company that is point of sale financing. And a few years ago, Goldman Sachs bought the majority in the company. So obviously you're thinking, well, with Goldman Sachs, you're going to have access to their clients' line of credits, like it's really going to be a massive flywheel, literally. But the thing is, Goldman Sachs is a very large organization, and the arm that invested in Finance It, well, they didn't really have any opportunities to have Finance It work with other parts of the bank. So basically what was supposedly a strategic investor ended up being just a financial investor. So that's also something, sometimes that's fine. You might not want to be stuck into trying to find synergies when they don't exist. But if you plan these synergies in terms of potential growth, that's always way more complicated. I worked at a couple of banks in Canada. You can find it on my LinkedIn. I won't mention necessarily which institution, but one I remember very well, put in place a partnership with a very renowned fintech startup here in Canada. And it took 1 year to put together the deal, a lot of work for the entrepreneur to put together the deal. And then there is no value that came out of that. So massive waste of time during that year, spending time chasing the well. He could have signed smaller deals or just do his own business. So when you advise your entrepreneur, when you're looking at this different avenue to grow, there are pros and cons to each of these different type of equity investors, and you really need to keep that in mind. So that I would say number one. Number two, unfortunately, you don't always have a choice. And in a perfect world, you pick exactly the investor you want when you want it, but otherwise it's difficult. So we have a question from Sue. Do you have good examples of strategies? I always hear horror stories. Okay, so well, I give this example of Finance It and Goldman, the other bank I worked with, and this fintech, which I'd rather not name. I think we always hear the horror stories because they make for so much better stories, you know. But having worked in large organizations for a big part of my career, it's extremely difficult for a large organization to partner with a startup or a small organization. Because keep in mind that if you're working, and I'm going to keep the example of banks because I know that very well, if you are a very large financial institution, the efforts that will require to partner with a small organization, that won't yield enough return for you to allocate the effort. So I would say that, for example, a small fintech gaining 1,000 clients might be extremely happy with that. It's barely a rounding, it's not even a rounding error for a large organization. So it's very difficult to get management time and management attention because it's just not significant enough. And so you're right, Sue, you always hear our stories because it is very difficult to do it right. And to be honest with you, I know a lot of horror stories myself. I don't know a lot of success stories. And maybe it's a beer. Maybe, again, we're always addicted to horror stories. It's funnier. But yeah, that's strategic is a tough one. I hope I answered your question. Before I jump, I see. Sorry, there's more in the chat. How easy is it to find family office? They don't tend to advertise. Exactly. Family offices are very tough to find. It's usually coming from, you have an advisor, and when I say you, the entrepreneur have an advisor or an investor that knows of a family office, and that's all. The door open, and then maybe the family office likes what he sees or think is not the right person, but another family office is, they might introduce you. But it's extremely challenging, first to find them, and second to get a meeting and be able to sell. So that's, again, it's like like a wool. You take a string and you're really pulling. And usually you need to have built. That's the challenge as well when you're raising equity, is that it's a long-term play. You need to have built relationship before people, fair enough, part themselves with their money. They want to know who they're talking with. So they ideally, it's very rare that anyone give you a check after one meeting. It's going to be months of dating. So, which is also why it's so important to raise money and start actually this conversation before you really need the money, that's the game. Before I jump to the next slide, was there any questions in this on these investors, this different type of bucket?
Just a quick one, Peggy. Going back to the incubators thing, I think, they've popped up in accelerators. There's pretty much a zillion of them. And I think especially when we have early stage entrepreneurs, they're looking at or being courted by dozens. Some have big names like Y Combinator, which is an accelerator, or Techstars you mentioned. And there's lots of small and specialized ones. The no-brainer is, I'll just sign up for one of those and go through that process. How should these mentors advise their startups to sort of pick and choose, or not even use them at all? Because I'm sure that's going to come across their plate, whether they want it or not.
Yeah, what I was mentioning a bit earlier, I think the value of an incubator / accelerator is really, are you looking for help in terms of strategic growth, defining your product market fit, your your unique economics, or all these things. So it needs to be, you need to be early enough that you haven't figured it out yet. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your time because you've done it already. But you also need to have enough to be able to build alongside the incubator. So it's been a few years that I've been an advisor, and what do you call that? Like, an advisor, I guess that's the word, on the Techstar in Toronto, the Techstar incubator accelerator. I never know what words they use, but and it's interesting to see, like, some of these companies are extremely successful already, and they're already quite accomplished. And I'm always wondering why you would come in an incubator or an accelerator when you're already later stage, kind of. But very often they're looking at expanding in another geography. They're looking at expanding their product line. They're looking to raise money. So they have a problematic that is very well defined. And I think that's really the key. You don't join an incubator or an accelerator because you're offered to join one, and that sounds cool, I think you need to join it with a purpose, and that purpose is very often a bit of a pivot, or adding, again, geography, product line, that type of stuff. Yeah, thank you. So what I mean by qualifying your investors. So I speak with, like you, I'm sure, tons of entrepreneurs, and the first thing that people tell me is that, oh, a VC. And sometimes with barely, I won't say a napkin, but barely a pitch deck. I'm like, well, you're going to need to have more traction, more metrics, more actual results before starting and chatting with VCs. As I said, mostly because, especially in Canada, we have very few pre-seed investors, VC investors, but also in general, unless you are a serial entrepreneur who had been successful, people, they don't know you, and ideas are cheap. Any one of us can come with a great idea on a PowerPoint. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to execute. The execution part is the most difficult. So this idea of going and seeing venture capitalists very early stage to raise money is not a good idea. I think it's good to build relationship and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, any advice, I'll keep you in the loop. And, every 3 months you send an update with your new metrics, that type of stuff, then that makes a lot of sense. But if you're extremely early stage, don't waste your time going after venture capitalists, honestly. Like it's not, there is no value there. And you're gonna be exhausted as well. So, and I know that Rob sent you a document explaining the different stage, pre-seed, seed, extension, series A. So I'm not going to go into that. But let's say that, depending on the stage you're at, there are investors that will be your sweet spot. The earlier you are, the least sophisticated, the least institutional your investors will be. So as I mentioned, family and friends, these are always very much appreciated, first for the money, but also for the commitment. So that's very good for very early stage. Business angel, same thing. After you have super angels, meaning very high net worth individual who can write bigger check. So they're going to be able to follow you. But usually it's the size of the check that basically tells you at which stage people can invest. So unless you are a very wealthy individual, you're not going to put a check for a Series A because the valuation, the size of check is way too big for you. So you're going to invest usually at pre-seed or seed level. If you are a family office and you're extremely successful, you can invest, like all the way. So what I'm trying to see, and you can see it, is again, the bigger the check, the further ahead the company in the stage, the more institutional investors will be. I think that's just what that slide is trying to tell you, actually. Any questions on that slide? Or I'm sure that kind of makes sense intuitively already. Okay, so one thing that's very important, and I guess that seems obvious, but you'd be very surprised, is how much are you going to raise? And it's not necessarily, okay, I'm going to raise 1 million. Okay, why would you raise that amount? And for each category you're picking, and you can see here on the slide, whether the business is a software as a service or a consumer product, what are you going to do with that money? So if I look at that raise of $750,000, and we think we're going to allocate $250,000 for acquisition costs, so meaning acquiring clients, your investor is going to ask, okay, well, show me, what is your current acquisition cost? What are the different channels you're going to use, and or you're backing into that number? So it cannot be a number that is just, well, you know what, I think I'm going to raise 500 or 1 million because, And at the same time, keep in mind that you're diluting, or the entrepreneur, the funding team is diluting his capital every time he's raising equity. So don't raise 3 million if you need 750,000 just because you can raise 3 million. That's a very, very bad reason to do that. And you'd be surprised by the number of entrepreneurs who do that because they're told they can. There is a lot of glamour around raising big check. Maybe if you're supposed to raise 750 and you are offered 3 million, maybe you will increase a bit the size of your raise to, let's say, 1 million. So you have a buffer, you can accelerate faster, that type of thing. But one thing that's extremely important, again, is to make sure the raise you're doing is aligned with what you want to do with that. So it's the other way around. What am I going to do? What do I need? And when I add all these amounts, this is my equity raise. And then on the other side, that means I'm going to win 10,000 clients. I'm going to generate $200,000 of revenue. I'm going to have a new product. I'm going to have this. I'm going to have that. So everything is aligned.
But Peggy, a lot of entrepreneurs, because once you get on the fundraising treadmill, it's a distraction, right? So like you're not running your business, you're raising money. So I get you don't want to over dilute and take too much money, but isn't it good if you're like, listen, I'm probably going to need more money anyway. So get the money now. And I'm buying myself a little bit of time to focus on the business.
But your valuation, my dear.
Yes.
And I'm sure that's why you're asking the question. It's this type of loaded question, when you know the answer, but you want to ask it. I like you're a good partner. But The challenge obviously is the valuation. So if I'm raising $750,000 when my company is valued at 7 million, let's say, I want to raise next maybe 1.5 million when my company is at $15 million valuation. If someone is offering me 1.5 million when my valuation is only 7, I'm really diluting myself. So, you know, the challenge that fundraising actually is not an exact science, because you cannot run parallel scenarios at the same time. You don't know if in 6 months, 1 year, you will need the money and the market has closed and you're not going to be able to raise. You don't know if your business is going to be on fire and, oh, maybe I should have raised only 250 because I'm going to be able to raise at a way bigger value. So you will never take a perfect decision, ever. But you can make sure that the decision you're taking is the best, considering the information you have and knowing, again, knowing what you're going to be asked, exactly, you know, the details as I was mentioning, but also this impact on your valuation and on your dilution. That's information you need to know, and that's something that as advisor, it's very, very important for you to know that, because entrepreneurs don't always know that, obviously. You know, like, you can be an amazing tech entrepreneur and have no clue about fundraising, which, I mean, is not abnormal. You know? So that's why it's so important. You know, it's funny because I started writing a newsletter on Substack, and the audience is investors, board members, and entrepreneurs, because the three of them, these three groups, need to know the same thing. You as an advisor need to know that. You cannot just say, well, my entrepreneur is going to take care of that. Because it happened to me in the past. I was on the board of a company, and you're telling the entrepreneur, you need to start raising now because it's going to take 9 months, and your run rate, meaning the budget you have to survive until whatever, is going to just bring you there. And the entrepreneur doesn't understand, doesn't want to do it. And you're like, yeah, you need to do it now. So it's very, very important for you to know that. You know, most companies die because they run out of money. That's the number one reason companies die. So we tend to focus on the product. We tend to focus, but it's the money is what's gonna kill your company if you don't have any. So that's why that topic is so important. We spoke a bit about valuation, and this as well, back to Rob's point with the document he sent you already, are based on USD valuation and round size. So it gives you, I love that, it's put together. I'm not sure if I put it, I'm sorry, I should have put it in my, maybe it's on my last slide. It's put together by a VC in Germany, 0.9. And they do that for B2B marketplace. And I think we do that for SaaS business as well. And that's interesting for you because it gives you an idea of if you don't have to necessarily look at the round size and pre-money valuation, but it still gives you an idea of what is required. A founder with a unique insight, that type of market, that type of growth. And that's important for you to see, okay, where is my company? And what do they need to put in place? And that's obviously is linked to the valuation and the amounts they raise. It's a chicken and egg, basically. I don't want to spend too much time on that. It's really just to show you the structure. Oh, yeah, woman. And I realize we only have 8 minutes left. So again, if you have questions, please use me as much as you can while I'm there. So if you have women entrepreneur, and I hope you do have women in your portfolio, so that study is a study, I think it's written from Harvard Business School or Harvard Business Review, actually. Women are asked different questions than men when pitching at VCs. It is what it is. I don't want to get into, it's not fair, whatever. That's the reality. So if you look, for example, the column on the right, prevention, these are the type of questions women are asked. One on the left, promotion, these are the type of questions men are asked. You understand very quickly reading these questions that it's easier to look exciting with promotion type questions than with prevention type question. So when you coach your female entrepreneur and also your male entrepreneur, that cannot hurt, just make sure they really understand that it's not because I'm asking you one question that you have to answer exactly that. So let's say you are asked a question that is prevention type. You can answer it very fast or not answering it. I always say, be like a politician. Say what you want to say. And it's extremely, extremely true for women. Just be very careful that if people put you in a little box, you don't stay politely in that little box. Expand. Because unfortunately, they are less likely to be asked the questions that's going to make them look good. So they need to make themselves look good by themselves. So do you have any question on that? Is it clear, the promotion prevention thing? Oh, I see something in the chat. So Hélène Farrell from St. Mary's University has done research on this and has a company that helps women understand how to handle this. Okay, that's good information. Thank you, Lynn. That's great. Yeah, because that's something that, structurally is more challenging for women. So let's keep that in mind. I see we have another chat. And CWB was the partnership to embark the research, and we use that software with our 7 founders. Okay, so you're very well aware of that. Okay, that's great. Okay, that's good. It's important to know that it's on your radar and that you are aware. So I'm not gonna go because we have 5 minutes left, and what I have might not be the most important thing. The fact that you're gonna need, your entrepreneur gonna need certain fundraising materials when they go pitch. And, there is obviously the elevator pitch, you know what it is, the 2-minute sound bites, the exec summary, which is what you send. You don't want your entrepreneur to send their pitch deck, full pitch deck with all the data to whoever is taking potentially a meeting or answering an email. Keep in mind that this is confidential information. So before you totally open the kimono, let's make sure that it's a real contact, it's a real potential investor. So that's why it's important to have different type of documents, some that show more or less information. You're obviously going to need all your financial modeling, but that's always something that investors like to see. The earlier stage you are, the less data you have. So there is this idea that, early stage you buy the vision, later stage you buy the traction. And early stage, you usually have less data to show, but you really need to have, even if you don't have a lot of months of existence, but client acquisition costs, you need to understand your metrics, your KPIs. That's very important. And then the business plan, private placement memorandum is basically the document that will be given to the investors with the terms. Demo, people always like a demo, so that is good. And testimonials. And let me jump to this page. I'm sure, Rob, you can share it. Testimonials are always great. Showing testimonials from your clients, obviously, but also your employees, your investors. The more people love social proof. Even VC, even institutional investor, people love social proof. So go for it. Don't hesitate to put, 2 pages of testimonial. And then, more documents. Again, I don't want to go into that. I think you've already got so much information that might be an overkill, and it will be on the slides. Another thing that is interesting is to understand what early stage investor want, because that's what you want to tell them that you are, obviously. So you can look at that. Obviously, most I'm looking at business model can demonstrate capital efficiency. That's this idea that the more clients you have, the more money you make. That's really typical of a software type of business. It's not true for any other business you might see. Of course, they want leadership team who have deep expertise in the type of business they're in, that type of thing. Repeat entrepreneur, that's always a nice thing. So as I mentioned, build relationship now. That's very important. Know your numbers, the metrics, very important, shows that you're really managing your business. Beggars are not choosers. What I'm trying to say with that is, the more investors you have in your Rolodex, or whatever we call a Rolodex now, the better it is, because the more choices you're likely to have. If you don't have a lot of conversation, not a lot of term sheet, you're going to take what people give you. Bring your energy level up. As I mentioned, it's going to be a lot of no's. So that's a bit tough to emotionally sustain it. We don't always talk about it, but it's the reality. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. They're going to spend a lot of time doing that. I was mentioning VC is a business of pattern recognition. So, when you're going back to what they want, well, this is the pattern. You want to give them what their brain is used to, as long as it's obviously accurate. Don't misrepresent your business. iBankers. So sometimes some companies raised with the help of advisors. Some people got good results, not always the case. Institutional investors don't always like to see entrepreneur using third party. They think it's a waste of money. So depending on where you are, if you have a lot of relationship or not. And obviously good match with your investors. As I mentioned, if you have the same type of strategic direction, that's ideal. Rob and I were laughing about the last, like if you feel like your VC is a proctologist, run for the hills. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to work with people who are proctologists. So if you have a choice, avoid. But if you don't, well, that's going to be the reality of it. So I hope you liked the conversation. I know it was a lot of information I've thrown at you in 1 hour. So I hope if there is one thing I would love you to remember, is that it's very important. Fundraising is very important. And you as an advisor, you really can make a difference. As I was mentioning, I have a newsletter that you should subscribe, because every week you're going to have insights, and that's going to keep you in the loop. And yes, that's my LinkedIn, my Twitter. So don't hesitate to ping me, and I'm not sure if are we advertising the session or not. If you do, please tag me, and I will share, like, and comment. Et voilà. Any parting words? Or two. So that's not too bad. Any things anyone wants to share, or Rob, anything?
No, we don't have to stop if you can stay another few minutes. If there's questions, Peggy, that was fantastic, a lot. And so if there's anything that comes to mind with anybody, do you want to, if you could stick around for a few more minutes, Peggy, is there anything anybody wanted to bring up with Peggy while she's here? Thank yous and sorries. um, oh, Lynn, you raised your hand. Go.
Yes, hi. Peggy, thank you so much for that. It was awesome to see that. And I'm curious as to your thoughts around non-dilutive funding. So funding that a lot of entrepreneurs might get from different sorts of government agencies, and where you would see them sort of fitting into the process from an entrepreneurship stage. So stage where the company is at from a staging perspective.
Yeah, usually, and thank you for the question, early stage, very early stage company. So usually, they really go for this grant as much as they can because they don't have much to show for and it's difficult to raise money. So I think that's, anything that can be helpful is obviously great if you can have access to that. Obviously, if it's non-dilutive, it's even better. Later stage, to your point, usually it's a bit more difficult for companies, and which makes sense. They don't probably need this capital anymore. But and one thing I didn't mention is that you have organizations that actually help entrepreneurs to find what are the grants, because it's not always easy to navigate. So you have organizations the same way you have SHRED, expert that helps file the SHRED credit. You have expert that helps finding the right grants for your business, and that is worth exploring for entrepreneurs.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Any other ones? You don't even have to raise your hand. You can just talk. I did have one just last parting question, Peggy. The other direction. So while these mentors are mentoring these entrepreneurs and you're looking at the opportunities to find investors of all different sorts, how would you counsel the entrepreneur to look for the right kind of investors, and are there signals that they should be looking for aside from do they have a proctology degree, just to make sure that they're partnering with the right people, assuming there's some semblance of choice?
Listen, the ideal thing is obviously, tech entrepreneur. I should stop saying tech entrepreneur. Sorry, that's my area of expertise. But entrepreneur technically should due diligence their VCs or their investors the same way, So having the best way is having other entrepreneurs, giving you feedback on the VCs they dealt with. Obviously, let's keep in mind that an entrepreneur, rightfully so, is not always very keen on sharing areas of improvement from an investor that's on his cap table, which makes sense, especially if you're not very close to them, So it's nice to say, do some due diligence on investors, but not everyone's going to be willing to talk. So yeah, you're right. In a perfect world, that's what entrepreneur should do, due diligence on investors. Yeah.
That's cool. There used to be, in the .com era, there was actually like a forum where entrepreneurs would share their experiences with investors. I don't know if that exists in this iteration of our little tech boom, but that would be cool if it does.
A bit like Glassdoor,
The opposite way around. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Glassdoor, my investors.